Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk. Time for the show. Hi all, and welcome once again to Once a DJ. I'm here with former resident of Liverpool's seminal nightclub Shabuku Shake Shake, London's Big Chill Bar, label curator, founding member of Eavesdrop Collective, and all-round shit-hot selector, Sarah Sweeney. She's going to talk to us about her journey through DJing and the role music's played through all aspects of her life. Sarah, thanks for coming on. Could you start by telling us about how music first came into your life?
So I grew up in a seaside town called Southport in the northwest of England, which is famous for, most relevantly to me, the Southport Weekender. But I grew up with loads of music around me all the time. You know, I grew up in the 80s, and you know, there was still big concerts going on about freedom and liberation. You know, the Nelson Mandela concerts. You had Live Aid. You had all of that stuff. And there was a lot of political unrest going on. There was riots, there was strikes, and I was, you know, blissfully unaware of all of this stuff, but just soaking in all that kind of musical, creative, connective stuff as I was, you know, also playing with my Barbie doll and blah blah blah. And I kind of, you know, there was Sesame Street was going on, Top of the Pops was on, all of this kind of melting pot of music, which was, I suppose, on one hand very rich and diverse, and then on the other hand a little bit confusing, because, you know, I'd be listening to Jason Donovan, swooning over him, and then I'd be doing the Running Man to MC Hammer, and it was all of that kind of stuff was going on as I was growing up, and there was always vinyl around me, always. So my dad very much was into the Northern Soul scene, and he would talk about, you know, Motown and all that kind of stuff, and we'd always have, you know, we'd have the stereo with the vinyl player on top, and we'd always have music whilst we were listening to... we'd always have music while we were eating food. So I suppose I had records around me a lot, I had music around me a lot, and it was a big part of my parents' life. And, you know, as soon as I was kind of out and about in town, I'd go to, you know, Woolworths and pick through the bargain bin of the records there, and I'd pull out a De La Soul 7-inch, or I'd hang around in Our Price and listen to whole albums on the listening posts and stuff like that, and we'd get kicked out, you know. So it was all of that. I was thirsty for it from a very young age because it was always around me. And I think at the same time, you know, you had like this rave culture permeating through into mainstream music, so you'd be listening to Technotronic, and you'd be listening to Mantronics and Public Enemy, and, you know, Frankie Knuckles, and all of this stuff was kind of coming at you on the radio or on TV. And, you know, you had TV programs that were promoting, you know, certain lifestyles and cultures, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, A Different World, all of this kind of stuff. So there was just, you were just immersed in it the whole time. So then I kind of, started collecting records, and I had my cassettes, and I had my first CDs and those kind of things. And, you know, my first CD was, I think it was Kenny Thomas, was one of my first CDs. Prince, Diamond and Pearls was another one. So CDs were just kind of coming through as well. So I suppose when I was in my teenage years, I started going into Liverpool and started going to record shops, because, you know, the cool baggy clothes, the Stussy clothes were in one shop, and you go into another, there'd be a record shop next door, and it was all very much these kind of, I suppose, cultural hotspots in cities, Affleck's Palace, you know, all that kind of stuff in Manchester. So you'd buy your baggy jeans, and then you go and listen to some records, and, you know, I was trying to be cool and pull out certain tunes and stuff like that. And I think I bought my first proper bit of dance music vinyl. I think it was like some think it was even called the Piano Tune or something like that. I can't remember who it's by, but it was Piano House. So, we had all that kind of K-class sound going on as well, and the evolution of the hacienda coming through into what we were listening to. Me and my kind of crew. So that was kind of the backdrop of my musical immersion, I suppose, through my younger years, and then coming into my teenage years and finding my own identity. And we had teen scenes then, so rave culture was definitely out and about now, and you go to like a Tuesday night or a Thursday night and you'd all kind of come together and be having a rave with your can of Coke and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was just there. It was very, very present. People were DJing off vinyl and what have you. So I just was in it. I didn't even really think about it. It was part of my culture. It was part of kind of my lineage and my growing up. And I suppose going to it was very difficult to get into raves because I was underage, I was 15, 16, that kind of thing. And it was all still a little bit taboo and what have you. But we had the Southport Weekender, which has just happened in Bognor. Same name, different places now, but it was in Pontins in Southport. And I had a friend whose parents would get us passes, sneaky passes. And we used to go in, there was a good handful of us that would go to the Southport Weekender underage. And that for me was just a massive eye-opener into this whole world and the interconnectivity of all of these different genres that I'd been hearing and seeing, as I was growing up. But I'd never seen that music and people dancing on a dance floor and it not be, on a screen or through a radio. And it was a very enlightening kind of moment for me where I actually felt like I'd come home. I knew where I belonged. And I belonged in all of those rooms because I knew different pockets of music from, the soul, the boogie, the disco, from the stuff I was listening to there, the house music, which was like really relevant to me, the kind of new soul, hip hop, all of that kind of thing, all merging together. And I kind of felt like, this all makes sense to me in terms of a musical universe and a musical family. And I was really young when I kind of saw that. I remember going into the Connoisseur's Corner it was, and I think it was Dr. Bob Jones was playing. And I remember walking into this room and seeing all these spats shoes and jazz dancing, and I had never seen anything like it in my life. And I was like, it was a dark room, it was red, and then you just saw these people having dance offs to this music that I kind of knew and I felt like I knew, but it was just like mind blowing that you could be listening to Roger Sanchez in one room and then you could be listening and seeing all of that going off in another room. And to somebody who's young, it's standard for a certain generation. That's kind of how it all happened. But for somebody that's kind of my age, I suppose at that time, it was like, what is this kind of thing? So my whole world opened up then, and I really got into, I think that really solidified me as a music lover and somebody who could see the connectivity of all these different kind of music that I've been exposed to in a different way on the dance floor.
Having listened to quite a few of your mixes, I think that really comes across. That balance between all the different musical styles that you've got. It's really nice that that's carried all the way through since that experience.
Yeah, I feel like it's imprinted on me, that whole era of, early, mid to late 90s was a really fertile time for music to kind of have crossovers and be experimental, and new genres were still coming out at that time. You had garage, you had your drum and bass, you had your new jazz, you had your broken beat, you had your all this, and they're all relatives of jazz and disco and house, and it's all kind of all these, continuums and these little branches off you know, a particular genre of music, and I've always, you know, been lucky that I can hear that and try and pull that together in the way that I play. That was the biggest influence at a young age, was that kind of melting pot of the 80s, the kind of culture that was everywhere, you know, with when you were going out and about and shopping, and then, you know, the taboo of going out raving when you were underage and all of that exciting stuff.
So how did you start to move from music fan to DJ?
Because I couldn't go out as much when I was a teenager, I had a group of friends, and mainly boys. There was a couple of, you know, I had my best friends with me as well, but they would be all learning how to DJ, and I had a childhood sweetheart, and we very much, you know, they very much encouraged me to have a little cheeky go whilst, you know, everybody else was having a Pepsi Max break and those kind of things. So there was always a set of turntables at somebody's house, and there was always a couple of tunes, and, you know, people were practicing mixing. And no, we didn't have any tutorials or anything like that. We'd probably gone to see people, or, you know, friends had older siblings who'd given them a little bit of a lesson, and we were all kind of botching it together, I suppose, and just giving it a go. So I would have a little cheeky go when I was, I don't know, 14, 15, and I think it was probably when I was about 16, 17, when I started to kind of get really serious about it with my partner. And, you know, at that time, yeah, it would have been 16, 17, you had all the kind of Positiva records, you had the Bomb coming out, you had all of these, you know, these different records coming out. You had amazing mix CDs that you could listen to as well, so you could really hear the craft in a lot of these seminal mixes. So the Ministry of Sound, Masters at Work, 2 DJs, 4 decks, you know, and this was still all being done on vinyl. And Roger Sanchez, Hard Times, where he was a hip hop DJ originally, but he would bring his kind of scratching talents into house, and he would double up tunes, and, you know, all of those kind of techniques and things that made music come alive even more on these CDs. And, you know, it was the kind of birth of big clubs and brands, and, you know, you had Renaissance and you had Cream becoming these things, and CD compilations and all of this stuff. You were still being totally immersed in, like, the music, the culture, the mixes, the DJs, you know. So it was
it was the era of the superstar DJ, wasn't it?
That, and also the mixtapes as well, and radio, you know. We'd have mixtapes that were being handed around. You'd have a Laurent Garnier or a DJ Vertigo tape being handed around, and you'd listen to those, or you'd tune into Stu Allen on Key 103, and, you know, listening to him on a Friday night, and I'd be recording it on my little stereo and listening to that cross genre of stuff. Then it was still really alive, and, well, it still is now, but, you know.
Do you think that there's something about that era of DJ? Because, like you were saying about Roger Sanchez, a lot of them, like, I love Kenny Dope, and Kenny Dope, again, he comes from that multi-genre sort of background. And particularly if you had the people that were around in, I mean, New York in 1977, when it was the birth of punk, it was the birth of hip-hop, it was the birth of kind of dance music, really, wasn't it, through disco?
Yeah.
And I guess there were people that were influenced by all those different things, rather than maybe the generation after that, where it was a lot more about people going down their own specific route and being a very specific type of DJ.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, those kind of DJs, it's a particular era, and I think there's a certain kind of generation as well in between, you know, Gen X and millennials, where we were at the tail end of all that rich musical influence, and then we were at the beginning of this whole new kind of culture and way of being, you know, expressing yourself and coming together. And, you know, it was a really special time. And yeah, DJs like Kenny Dope, I would, you know, Mr. Scruff, Giles Peterson, Stu Allen, I'd even say him, although he was more on the kind of ravey side of things, but he was very much influenced by hip hop and Jungle Brothers and all of that, hip house and all of that kind of sound. So yeah, I think that's kind of very much permeated through. And then I think as people became more niche or well known for a specific sound, then obviously they focused on that kind of what slightly separated them out as an eclectic DJ. And that's kind of created more streams and more avenues and stuff like that. But yeah, DJs like Kenny Dope, Louis Vega. I mean, I was a massive fangirl of Daft Punk, of Basement Jacks, of, you know, all of that kind of Armand Van Helden. I would be watching them, you know, as I got a bit older. I'd go out to clubs and be very much on the decks. I would call myself a deck pigeon. I wouldn't really move. I'd watch them DJ. I'd watch what white labels they had in their bag so I could go to a record shop the next week and, you know, maybe pull some of those out. All while I was learning how to, you know, make mixes and do those things. And I learnt on a belt drive. I think it was it was one 1200 and one belt drive and a awful little mixer. So I really, you know, learned the push and pull of vinyl and that kind of tactile sensitivity with a 1210, and really, you know, it's like you're mixing a cake on a belt drive. So the difference in dynamics as you're kind of mixing, because you make do with all these little bits and pieces that you get donated.
Yeah, so just for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, belt drive turntables and direct drive turntables work in two different ways. Belt drive is effectively a belt that's turning the wheel. Direct drive is a magnet, and there's a significant difference in the quality between the two, and the feel and the experience of them, and how easy or hard they are to mix on. So it's like trying to win a Formula One race in a Ford Fiesta, kind of. It's that type of thing you've got to imagine. So it's people trying to perform their absolute best, but with some of the worst equipment. So what were your first experiences DJing like, and how did you get those first gigs?
So I got a job in a bar in Southport called Bar Flavour, and I've always followed my nose where I can kind of get a bit of a musical experience, and that was the guy that was running that used to run the Blue Note in London. It's a guy called Alan Turner, and I just got a job on the bar there, and just so again I could see and maybe weave them away and see what avenues were there for me to maybe play some of the records that I've been playing and stuff like that. Now, at the time, Adele Roberts, who is a BBC Radio 1 DJ, was DJing in there. She was a couple of years older than me. She was DJing in Leeds. She was DJing in Southport. She was back and forth. And I told her that I was a DJ and that I collected records. And actually it was Adele Roberts who let me go on the decks in a bar for the first time. And she really encouraged me to pursue that. And I was still DJing with my younger, childhood sweetheart. We were still practicing and what have you. And we were really geeky about all that stuff and the art of it and the kind of, we really geeked out when we made mixes on our CD recorder. It was a meditative thing. It was a spiritual thing that we were doing, and I don't think we realized it at the time, but that kind of curation and creation of a space to, I suppose, be open and kind of mix music in that way. I haven't quite been able to replicate that, mainly because my life has completely changed now. But going from a bedroom DJ into a bar was really amazing. Obviously, I could see what was going on when I was working, and then I was given some, weekday slots for 50 quid in a brown envelope, and that paid for my next load of records kind of thing. It was very much, I was feeding it back into the local record shop or, a bit further afield. So that was my first gig really, was in a bar, and I was playing for 5 hours on a weekday, and I was 18.
Your first gig was 5 hours?
Yeah, mate, I could do 5-6 hour sets standing on my head. Yeah, but that's how I learned to be, as I suppose, as eclectic and really understand that the job of a DJ is to take somebody on a journey, whether that is a 4 or 5 hour journey or a 1 hour journey or a 2 hour journey. And I actually, for me, the optimum set is about 2 to 3 hours would be perfect.
Same.
But 4 to 5 hours, there's so much music that even now, there's so much music you can go through, and there's so many BPMs that all make sense. And you start off with something at 70 and you end up at 150 BPM, and you told a whole story, and you can even loop it back and mix it back into it. So it's for me, it's kind of it's just part of the sounds that I grew up in, and there's so many different avenues to go off on. So anyway, I got my first job in a bar, and I think that is really where I learned my musical values as well. The guy that ran the bar and he ran the Blue Note, he was able to polarize all of that musical stuff I was talking about earlier, which was in the 80s. There was a lot of change going on, the strikes, the riots, the civil unrest in Northern Ireland, and he was comparing what was going on over there for him, likening it to the civil rights movement and layering it up with what Public Enemy was really about, telling me about civil rights movements like Donny Hathaway and Aretha Franklin, and I got a different education that I wasn't really expecting. I had some context around the music that I loved. I felt it, but I didn't understand it. As a 18-year-old white girl from Southport, I was never going to fully understand.
You can't simulate that lived experience.
No. And, and I think a lot of the stuff that I listened to and observed and watched, even just watching the Blues Brothers as a younger person, or all that kind of stuff, it was all very exciting, and, kind of had different connotations for me, as somebody looking from the outside into, a cultural snapshot. And for me, the music then became, I became a guest in a lot of that music then for me, and it was really important that I understood and honoured, some of the background of what that music came from. And I do include disco, and I do include house in that. That was disco music, was liberated, queer communities in New York and all kinds of stuff. It's so rich, it's so attached to liberation and freedom and expression of the self that, it's important to remember that that's why those spaces were created, and you have to honour the legacy of some of those spaces for me. That was really important. So I got a job in a bar in a seaside town where I played for 5 hours, but I also got a musical education that I wasn't really expecting to have.
Amazing. So how did you go on from there?
I always was excited about how you could always, if you were behind the decks and somebody came to talk to you, there would be always a way of finding, you'd always find a way to connect. So if somebody's approaching you about your music, unless they're asking for something to dance to, in which you go, everyone's dancing, what are you talking about? But, when you had somebody asking what tune it was or this, that and the other. So I ended up talking to a lot of people and just kind of following threads. And from there, I was playing, the salsa movement was going on as well, in all these bars that I was kind of playing. It's salsa night from, 6 to 8:30. And then if you could start at 9, so there was always a crossover with something else that was going on and some movement. And this guy from Liverpool called Roger, he ran the samba school in Liverpool, and he asked me to go and play either side of the samba band playing. So then I went over to Liverpool, and I ended up being the DJ in between a samba band in a club called The Mask. And that was really exciting as well. So I was then DJing with live samba bands and all very exciting stuff, and just buzzing off kind of all of that thing. And then in there was a couple of promoters from another night that went on in the Mass called Shibuku Shake Shake. It was seminal night. Again, they'd be putting Giles on one night, and they'd have Leon Bushwhacker on another night, kind of thing. So I got asked if I would like to be a resident at that club, and of course I said yes. And weirdly, the person that I learnt to DJ with, they had also been asked, but separately, because we were gone our separate ways. I'd gone off to uni, la la la. But we were kind of ended up playing on a lot of lineups, so we still had that affinity going on musically, and so that made it a lot easier to kind of be, I suppose, a little bit more out there with other people and kind of bigger name DJs, so to speak.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying Once a DJ. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show, and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on. So I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com. And if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com. If you're an avid collector of timeless music on vinyl but don't have the budget to fork out for those pricey originals, then look no further than Be With Records. From library music to yacht rock, jazz, hip hop, disco and beyond, Be With lovingly reissue some of the coolest classics. All of their records are carefully remastered and cut to the highest standards to make sure the pressings are of peak audio quality and do justice to the music being released. And something else to note is that they don't do limited runs to drive up resale and hype. If the demand is there, they'll repress, as the focus is the music, not the profit margin. They have flat rate shipping and free UK shipping on orders over £60. And if you head to bewithrecords.com and use the discount code ONCEADJ, all one word, you'll get 10% off your order. So head to bewithrecords.com and level up those crates today. Yeah, so did you not do uni then?
I did go to uni. I went to uni for a couple of years. I went to Nottingham Trent. I did fine art. But I was also really into my music still. So part of the reason why I went to Nottingham Trent was because there was a club called The Bomb there. And they had DJs over from Chicago. So you'd hear, Derek Carter, DJ Gemini, DJ Heather would come over. Kelvin Andrews was there. He was a resident, and got talking to him. So yeah, I was there, but I was also pinging back up north as well, or going to Leeds, or I was very much kind of following my nose with a lot of things. Going to London, going to Bar Rumba. It didn't really matter what night of the week you went to Bar Rumba because there was always something great on there. So
DJing and music really took precedence over university.
Yeah, it did. I think also looking back, hindsight, I definitely suffered a bit of a kind of, I suppose, a bit of a breakdown there. And what I didn't know until very recently is I had ADHD, and I was very much into everything. That's why I was, pinging here, pinging there, enjoying this, painting that. I was still painting music. It was just music the whole time. And I kind of decided that that's really, what I was concentrating on more was the music that I was painting to. And I took a gap year or two, and I never really went back. Right. I went back to Southport, worked in a record shop, and then from that, again, I just followed my nose and asked for work experience because I'm still, internships, work experience. It was still a way to get a foot in the door. At a time where I was, I was still relatively supported to be able to do so, and lucky in that respect. So yeah, I kind of started widening my musical family. Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield, Nottingham, London. I was kind of just following my nose with a lot of kind of musical influences and going to concerts and, gigs and clubs and stuff like that. So it was important to me. It was part of my life force to be chasing that. But then, obviously I needed to get a job. So I got a summer job in a record shop back in Southport. It was around 2000, 2001, and I just kind of started picking up the phone. I was ordering records. The owner let me order records whilst he was away DJing in Singapore, and I got chatting to a distributor on the telephone and explained that I was there part-time helping out, and he said, "Do you want to come and do some work experience?" So I went, yeah. So I went and did some work experience at an independent record distributor called Vital at the time. I was sorting out records while I was like, a kid in a toy shop. I'm like, all these tunes, all these records, sorting all this music out. And it was just vinyl upon vinyl, sorting out promo packs, understanding you've got to wait for pressing and, found out another layer of the music industry, really. So for me, it was all a bit of a treasure hunt kind of thing, following the clues and finding out about everything and immersing myself into that. So I did my work experience and, still had my residencies, playing midweek, at the weekend, what have you, playing in Liverpool.
So was that the most that you were playing in a week at that point?
Yeah, probably.
How many times a week would you have been playing in total then?
Oh, at least 3 or 4 times a week. So I might do a Friday, a Sunday and a Wednesday, with the occasional, cover shift or what have you. And I was also popping back on the bar and helping there as well, depending on what was, so I was just kind of around, here, there and everywhere really. But yeah, I was just in it a lot. I might be warming up for Roots Maneuver, or I might be, doing a 5-hour set in the bar in Southport kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I was doing. And then I did my work experience in London, and then I made the dive and moved there. I didn't have a job, but I thought, also at the time, what was happening was the whole broken beat West London sound was permeating through. So you'd had the new Eureka Soul album and all of that stuff, and all those kind of, that rich stuff was happening, and then this sound came out that it really resonated with me, and it was the broken beat scene.
Yeah.
Although they said that there was never a scene, it was a collective kind of thing. But it is, it's there. What for me, I moved to London so I could be closer to that scene because it wasn't happening so much up north.
So did you have a good contact base in London then at the time that you moved there, or were you moving down and having to kind of build a network relatively from scratch?
Well, I had a couple of people that I knew there. The person that asked me to go and do work experience introduced me to a couple of people. So when I went there, relatively blind, I'd moved with a friend, or they were moving there, and then I thought, oh, do you know what? I'm going to get out of Southport. I'm going to go to the big city and follow the sound of the broken beat kind of thing. And I know I sound massively cliched, but I genuinely love that music. Yeah. And so I kind of moved there without really much of a network. I suppose I had a couple of people in Southport that I would DJ with, and we connected over music. And then they'd had a friend in London, and that they said, oh, can you just, if there's any jobs going or anything like that. So I did, whilst I was first moved there, I moved stores. I did, kind of moved boots when, you go into the shop and they've changed the aisles and you're like, where's the blah gone? They've moved, I was the person that would go in at night and move everything around like a naughty little elf, but paid to do it. And then, that's kind of what I did whilst I was establishing myself in London. And I got Then I got a job in another record distributors, but that was an exporter, import-export. So that was international record sales that I was then working with. So whereas when I did my work experience at the Vital at that time, it was mainly UK labels going out into the world. Well, an exporter is, I suppose, a bit more grassroots, fluid kind of, you're bringing stuff in, you could sell some stuff to other distributors. There was a lot of music coming in there.
Yeah.
And a lot of vinyl.
Just one question then. The job at Boots, in hindsight, was that quite a good fit for ADHD? I'm saying this as somebody who doesn't know a lot about, but if you're kind of like constantly having to go from here to here to here, doing little bits and bobs.
It wasn't a great fit for me. It wasn't no. It was a means to an end to make sure I could, still eat, the following my nose and hyper focusing on music, that was, I think, is definitely a massive component for me and form of therapy when it comes to my ADHD. And it's a lot. I get a lot of my dopamine out of it. Not so much moving the nail clippers to the sandwich aisle, etc., etc. It's not. Didn't float my boat, but I just did what I needed to do. At that time. So I got a job in an exporters through a friend from Southport called Nick Reese, who was a DJ, and then he moved to London. And again, I got totally immersed, records all over the place. It was, again, just kidding, a candy shop kind of thing. And they let me buy records as well. And I had a few little moments where it was like, oh, I'm a part. I don't like. So again, I sound cliched here, but there were certain records like the Red Astaire Follow Me. I bought that up. They let me buy that. I was like, this is going to be massive. And, in terms of our scene, that Follow Me tune was really, a big underground tune.
I think I had that.
Yeah, so it was kind of, it's nice to be at the beginning of a record breaking with your community and that kind of thing. So I was still enjoying that and the hunt and being mesmerized by this is going to be great kind of thing, and trying to get it out to as many people. So I suppose it's a DJing mindset, but without actually playing it to lots of people, but pushing it out to everywhere. It's still part of the buzz for me was to share music. Whether it was selling it or playing it, I just loved doing that. I did some time in the exporters, and then I ended up getting a job in Vital, where I did my work experience. So I worked in the international department there, and then I went over to the UK side of things. So again, that was me dealing directly with record shops. So I had like an international record sales network, I suppose, at the time. And then I had back to the UK, so I'd be selling to record shops all over the cities and, having a weekly chat with all these people who, again, were pushing music out there. But at this point in time, you've kind of got the, CDs are doing their thing. Vinyl is very much for the DJ. And then Napster came on the scene, and then the digital kind of revolution was happening all at the same time, and it was having a massive effect on record sales. Everyone could get their music for free now. It changed everything. I think quite a lot of DJs were getting their music for free, and I certainly was taking some of my promos and going to Goya just round the corner and doing little swaps and those kind of things. So there's always an exchange of music happening, but I really think that that digital revolution really shook things up and changed things for a lot of people, certainly for the music industry as well.
Just at that point then, sorry, while you were doing this work, were you DJing much, or did DJing kind of fall by the wayside a bit?
Oh yeah, I was DJing as well. I was DJing in London. I had a residency a little bit later. I had a residency at the Big Chill Bar. I was still playing for Chibuku at the time. So there was a night that we had 2 nights, Chibuku London, where we had a night at the Heavenly Social, and I was there every Friday, more or less. And it would be me and a few other DJs that would play there. And then we had a night in 93 Feet East as well. So, you know, the night in Liverpool was then permeating into London as a lot of the residents kind of moved there. So I would be asked to play at various nights in London, or back in Liverpool, the occasional night in Manchester, and you know, I'd be going back when the Southport Weekender was on as well, and playing after parties and those kind of things. So yeah, I was still very much DJing, and finding my feet.
So how old would you have been at this point? Is this kind of approaching your mid-20s?
Yeah, so I'm about 22, 23.
So was that kind of the peak for you, or did it keep growing?
Well, I guess I was just in it and in the middle of it all, and didn't really see anything kind of changing. I was just doing my thing and connecting with people and enjoying the scenes that I was kind of involved in, and you know, going to lots of different nights. And one particular night, almost 20 years ago now, I went to Herbal in Shoreditch, and it was hospitality. But I wasn't going for that. I was going for a producer called Andreas Sag, who was Swell Session, who had a kind of nice soulful broken, kind of Swedish soulful broken twist album out, and I really liked that album. They didn't turn up, but there was another artist on called Landslide, who I kind of heard of, but it wasn't really the kind of drum and bass. I touched on a little bit of drum and bass, but it wasn't really my thing. I was really focused on house and soul, blah blah blah. Anyway, so I was working at one of these distributors, and we just got this promo in, and I approached Landslide and said, have you got, and he thought I was going to say Kylie Minogue or something like that, and I said, have you got the Seiji remix of Fertile Ground, The Moment, knowing damn well he didn't have it. I was just flexing. So I think because we'd only just got it in that day, and he kind of was a little bit taken aback, I think. And he went, no, I haven't, but I've got, you know, this and I've got that. And he played a couple of tunes for me, and I just loved it. You know, he played, I think it was Alison, David and Afronauts, Dreams Come True or something like that. I can't remember the name of it now. I get a bit embarrassed about it because it is actually a really lovely song. But that night I met Tim, I met Landslide, and you know, I was still working in the industry. He was a record producer. He was about to go on tour with London Electricity, and was making his own music and stuff. So we hung out, and we hung out a lot. And then, in 2004, found out we were pregnant. So I was 20, just turned 24.
So were you planning to have kids?
No, don't plan anything. That's ADHD. You try, it all goes wrong. So at that time, I was very much like, the universe is, you know, leading me here and leading me there. And I was before I even knew the yes man was a thing, I was like, yes, you know, it's all part of my journey and all of that stuff. But no, I hadn't planned to have children that early.
So how did that feel then, given the lifestyle that you had and the ambitions that you had? Was it kind of panic, or was it still like, this is the universe just giving me this path?
So in terms of my ambitions was to be connected and share music. That was really what it was. And there was a little bit of, you know, ego thrown in there, and trying to get certain places and what have you. But ultimately, you know, I was just kind of believing that, you know, all things happen for a reason, and I was kind of a little bit fatalistic about it. I was 24 when I found out, and 25 when I had Oscar, and I was still DJing. I was still DJing while I was pregnant. There's a great picture of me DJing at Chibuku's. I think it was it would have been their 5th birthday at Nation in Liverpool, where back, when I was younger, I say younger, was watching all my favourite DJs play. I was playing in the main room. So it was a really amazing experience for me to be 6 months pregnant, DJing, probably not a great idea as everyone was still smoking in clubs at that point. But, my son was with me when I was DJing, and I just felt on top of the world. I didn't feel like it was going to impact me at that point, being pregnant, because I was very much living in the moment. And as I say, I was quite young and perhaps a little bit naive. But yeah, so I carried on DJing up until I think I was about 8 months pregnant. And then I thought I'd better take it easy now, because I was still lugging records around, although we still had CDs. CDs were a little bit lighter to take around with you.
It's a lot of carrying and just a lot of travelling as well, isn't it?
I mean, it's a little bit easier, like I said, because it was CDs and a few records at that point. CDJs were everywhere, so it wasn't too bad. But I think it was just the late nights. But again, I thought, well, I don't know how long I'm going to be out of it, so I'm going to try and get as much in as I possibly can. Yeah, and I had a great time. And I do think that, him being in utero while I was playing and doing all these things is kind of, again, I was talking about how I was immersed with it, and as I was growing up, and he was definitely heard the bum, 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 along with my heartbeat and his kind of thing of the dance floor. So, it was all very cool and nice. And I didn't really think about, my future as a DJ or anything like that, because also I was kind of raised in an era where it was like, women can have the same as men kind of thing, in terms of career, or they should be able to. And there's very clear messages about that. So I just thought, well, no, that's just a given. And, I still have my job in the record distributors as well. So I was still in touch with music. So it wasn't my main bread and butter, my ambition, of DJing, this, that and the other. I just wanted to be around music. That was my thing.
So what was the experience after he was born? I take it you probably pulled the DJing back. I don't know how much, but was it a bit of a shock to the system? I mean, you've obviously got a little baby to be focusing on, but is there a bit of a feeling isolated? Because I think for a lot of parents, just say you just go on maternity, paternity, whatever it is, from any sort of job, you can feel a bit lost if there's just you. I don't know if you had like people around you in daytimes or not. I think it can be a very isolating experience. And if you're in something that's such a social world, did that really hit hard, or was it easy to adjust to?
Well, again, I think with this particular era around 2005, you've got the dawn of the kind of the next stage of the internet and technology and being connected. And I still did a bit of DJing whilst he was relatively young. Once the whole kind of breastfeeding period had ended, I went back to work after 6 months, because that was the norm then. So I went back working 3 days a week, and so I was still very much connected with music and what have you. And I was still doing a bit of DJing here and there, but not as frequently. But I didn't feel disconnected because things like MySpace came along. So there was a whole other music community. And again, that kind of led to talking to people online that you wouldn't normally have access to, listening to music, and kind of them having a very direct relationship with people. Whereas, that removing a layer of that mystique and what have you. So I still felt like I was part of something, because everybody was still engaging with each other and these new spaces. So
yeah, and MySpace was a really good platform for musicians as well, wasn't it? I don't know if you ever read, A-Track wrote a piece about it a few years ago. It's I'll try and dig it out for you. It's really interesting because as a social media platform for use for musicians, nothing's replicated its success.
No,
which is a massive shame.
Yeah. I think, yeah, well, obviously, Facebook came along and had a slightly different model, which I think mashed up MySpace and Friends Reunited in a particular way. But for me, MySpace, I've met friends on there that I'm still connected to now and very much part of my music family. So I didn't feel as disconnected because it coincided with a different way of connecting with people. So I was still able to listen to music, have my finger on the pulse, talk to people, in a way that I perhaps hadn't been able to earlier, where you were relying on record shops, you were relying on DJ magazines, you were relying on TV programs. There was a whole industry behind it, and it kind of stripped a layer away in some respects, but also it opened out a musical community in a lovely way. So I didn't feel as disconnected as I possibly could have done had I have had my child 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just kind of using the threads that are around me to stay connected and be part of something, whether it's to a lesser or greater extent, but for me it was enough. So yeah, I went, I still was working, one baby, London, my partner was working, and doing his own thing. And I was kind of finding vocalists and still kind of doing what I could do, following threads and trying to, kind of connect little bits and pieces as well, which was good. So I was learning about, I suppose, from the outside looking in, what goes into the creation of an album, and kind of learning that. So I'm always looking and kind of picking up on stuff. Just crazy about it all. So yeah, that was kind of going on, and then I moved to another distributor and became a label manager, and that was great because I was hunting labels out and working with them, and again that whole kind of digital revolution was forging forward, and I kind of got to see what that looked like in an independent music space as well, and how certain distribution companies were folding because they weren't getting with the program, so to speak, and then others were flourishing, and I was lucky enough to be with one that was flourishing called Kudos Records. So again, I had another layer of all of that, still surrounded by records, still, getting tickets to this, that and the other, still very much involved as and when I could, but obviously kind of reduced down. But if you're working in music, you don't really feel like you're missing out when connected to it in that way. I was still getting a buzz out of it. So, surrounded by records and what have you. So it was, that kind of carried on. And then I suppose the big change that happened for me and for us was my second child coming along in 2008. So we, two kids, one bed flat, London. We had to make a change really, and we moved out of London. A little bit around the houses, but we ended up in Wales. Moved a couple of times, and yeah, so 2008, I basically said goodbye to my music life for a little bit. I didn't know it at the time. I still kind of hoped that I would be able to do my usual, invisible strings connections with wherever I was ending up. But it's not as easy when you've got children.
Two's a lot more time consuming than one, isn't it? Because you can't just you can't go, you have this, I'm going to go off and do whatever I'm doing. It's like, you have this, well, who's going to have this other one?
Yeah.
So it is kind of like exponentially difficult, I think, to do things outside of it.
And then just for fun, between moving out of London and moving to Wales via Southend, I found out I was pregnant again. So I had 2 babies in 11 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that definitely then, my life completely changed. I was in a different place. I didn't have my support network, really.
Plus, I think in terms of DJing, and tell me if I'm being presumptuous here, please, your body's going through a lot of trauma multiple times, and DJing isn't a purely mental activity. It's pretty physical.
Yeah.
So there must be that sort of impact, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah. I think once I moved out of London, the DJing dwindled somewhat for me. I still had my residency at the Big Chill Bar while I was, pregnant with my second child. Still trying to do it the way I did it with my first pregnancy, but again, that was kind of, presenting itself in the reality that it was. And then, and then moving on, and then having another child, and then moving to Wales. It was very clear that what my job was, which was raising these kids, and that was okay. I felt okay about that, because considering I was, 29 now, and I had such a rich experience from such a young age, from being like 17 going out, 18 professionally DJing, working in the music industry, getting huge immersion in all of this stuff. I probably packed a lot more in than other people my age who are still trying to find their feet, or they've just come from uni, or they need to pivot, or they've just found music. So I'd got a lot in.
Yeah.
I'd played with some big names. I had no regrets in terms of, reaching my goals and ambitions or whatever. I played with a lot of people that I really, really admired. I'd had amazing opportunities. I was playing when I was pregnant. I knew a lot of people. I loved their music, and I had a good friendship with, and I felt like I was part of a music family. So for me, I was okay in letting all that go, because I was now part of something bigger through selling music and supporting through album production and all those kind of things. I had a different relationship with it. So the DJing is a way of me expressing my musical tastes and my feelings at a given time, and connecting and sharing with other people. But whilst you're kind of bringing kids up, the records went into the studio, because you had to make way for toys and kids books and those kind of things. So those lovely IKEA units that all the tunes were in, the records got packed up, and once I walked in, and the toddlers at the time, they were taking the records out of the sleeves and playing frisbee with my records, or posting them in between the floorboards. I was like, this has to stop. This is not working. So, that was the moment really when the music left my surroundings. I've been surrounded by music for 5-6 years, and in came the Bob the Builder toys, and in the night garden and all that kind of stuff. So I was just being a mum, and I think I kind of lost touch with a lot of music at that point. I think once you've got 3 kids under 5 that you're looking after, and you're in a new city and you're making a new beginning and what have you, that's just your whole world. But again, like I said, I felt like I was part of a music. I still have friends and what have you, and kind of living vicariously through them, being able to go out and see things, and being connected with them online as well. Again, that was a massive bridge for me to stay connected with people. And at this time, there were a couple of other women that I knew that were DJs, that were having children as well. So then I was having a different relationship with people. There was the people that didn't quite have children yet, and then there was the people that did, and the music was there, is that heartbeat, that connector, that vocation, that, that place. You can put a record on and you're instantly back on a dance floor, and you're constantly, you can always come back to a certain time and space and a memory just with one tune. So the internet, again, it was Facebook at this time.
Yeah.
And, I was still able to connect with people that I'd met on MySpace who'd now migrated over. And yeah, that kind of community was still ongoing. So I still kind of felt connected to it. And then I suppose when the kids were a little bit older, I put on a night here in Wales, in Cardiff, in a bar called Goody Who. And so I still kept it up. So I went from doing 3-4 nights a week down to once a month when I moved here, and I have 3 kids. But that's difficult setting up again. You have to be really on it to be an events promoter. And I don't have the energy, I don't think, not with kids, being a mum, and, cooking dinner, and then trying to do this, trying to sort this out, trying to sort that out, and then trying to promote a night and work like you haven't got kids, and have kids like you haven't got, a job, and pushing this and promoting this and what have you. I did that mainly for my own social stuff and for me to still feel connected and relevant. But I was just playing the music that I loved.
Yeah.
And had a few guests coming through, but yeah, and I was still kind of helping other people put albums out. I helped Lyrical put an album out, and was, just trying to keep my fingers, in there a little bit, whilst I was going through the maelstrom of being a mum, being a parent. So,
hey guys, I hope you're enjoying Once a DJ. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show, and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on. So I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com. And if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com. If you're an avid collector of timeless music on vinyl but don't have the budget to fork out for those pricey originals, then look no further than Be With Records. From library music to yacht rock, jazz, hip hop, disco and beyond, Be With lovingly reissue some of the coolest classics. All of their records are carefully remastered and cut to the highest standards to make sure the pressings are of peak audio quality and do justice to the music being released. And something else to note is that they don't do limited runs to drive up resale and hype. If the demand is there, they'll repress, as the focus is the music, not the profit margin. They have flat rate shipping and free UK shipping on orders over £60. And if you head to bewithrecords.com and use the discount code ONCEADJ, all one word, you'll get 10% off your order. So head to bewithrecords.com and level up those crates today. So in and amongst raising 3 boys, how did you manage to keep your toe in with DJing? It seems like you never 100% left it.
It was very important that I was still able to go and do a little bit DJing every now and again, and my partner really understood and supported that. So I was kind of having little escapes and DJing with other mums, and we had a night called Mums a Word, where we were just sharing music and kind of, having a dance, having a sing, expressing ourselves, and then going back to motherhood kind of thing. And that was, I think once a year or something like that when the kids were little. And then I had a few, kind of forays in playing in Cardiff. But by then, when you've got kids that are in primary school and climbing trees or roofs, or 3 boys is a lot of energy. And I was just in the thick of motherhood, really, and I very much kind of I didn't have that DJ music identity. I was very much mum for a very long time. I'd be mum forever, won't I? And also off the back of that, I was still kind of, connecting to people online and kind of, I suppose, current affairs as well. We had the Conservative government coming in, the whole kind of rhetoric around asylum seekers, and, you had smiley culture incident happening, and a lot of stuff around inequality, racism within the police that was still kind of coming up a lot on my feeds. And I think because I was taught about that in a musical way as well, it kind of started coming up in my mind a lot. And having children as well, you're acutely aware of the world that you're bringing them up in. And I kind of wanted to, without sounding like a white middle class white saviour complex, I wanted to make the world a better place. So I signed up to do a degree. Again, unbeknown that I had ADHD. I thought, I could do a degree in psychology with a 1-year-old, yada, yada, yada. I did that part-time, and I wanted to do psychology because I wanted to get into mental health, because a lot of the stories that I was seeing was about inequalities in mental health care provision for certain communities. And it kind of upset me a lot, because I think a lot of the mental health issues in Black communities, asylum seeking communities, came from their life experiences in their environment that wasn't really of their making or doing, and they were being systematically failed by our systems, again, which is what I learnt in a roundabout way through music, and then obviously expanded upon that. But then quickly I realised, psychology was too data-driven and a little bit dry, and I switched over to health and social care degree, and got work experience, work placement as part of my degree in an equality and diversity charity in a department that was commissioned by the NHS here in Cardiff to work with minority communities. I hated that word. And I ended up doing a lot of community support work for the asylum seeking community here in Cardiff. And, again, that was a big eye opener in terms of what inequality looked and felt like. And I worked in mental health, and then I've worked in other inequalities or equalities charities. So I worked for a women's charity as well to get people more involved in political and public life, because as I was finding out more about inequalities and failings of the systems, I wanted to get more involved in politics and talking to people and trying to influence and advocate and support for change, better treatment of everyone. But specifically marginalised communities. And I do think that, music definitely played a part in the structure of my values and my beliefs about what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of world that I'd hope that my children and other children would grow up into. So I was doing that for some time. I was still kind of doing my music, but again, I just kind of lost a little bit of contact with what was going on. I still was in contact with music producers and, but they were more like, and promoters and stuff, but they're more like friends rather than anything to do with my working world or the world that I was concentrating on, and motherhood. So, the friends that were parents, we spoke about being parents, we didn't speak about music anymore, kind of thing. So it was just, it just evolved and moved. So around 2019, I started a dedicated Instagram account to kind of log my musical journey. And the reason why I did that is because whilst I was having all those great gigs and this, that and the other, there was no phones anywhere. There was no real social media. There was not very many photos of me. And I didn't really have very many mixes that I still had hold of because, I didn't have all the equipment. I was parenting, I was working, or they got lost with friends, or, all of that stuff. So I was really trying to pull together the threads of my own DJing journey. I didn't know if I was going to go back to it, but for me, I wanted to go down a trip down memory lane, really. And I kind of started pulling together, you know, my first cassette player was my Fisher Price tape, and, you know, my first tape was Eddie Grant, and, you know, all of these kind of things, and just for my own memory, really, to reactivate that part of me. So that was a really nice starting point for me. And I always said, DJing will never leave me. Music will never leave me. It's part of me. So, like I said, I've never felt like I had to give it up as such, but it had to take a back seat. But it was always there. And as I was kind of doing that, I went to We Out Here. So this is just pre-lockdown. I went to We Out Here.
So that's the Giles Peterson Festival, isn't it?
Yeah. So I went to the first one of that. So, you know, in lieu of the Southport Weekender, because it wasn't really going on that much, or it might have been, but it wasn't in Southport. So to me, it was, you know, I wanted the sticky floors. I wanted the dark, dingy rooms. I didn't want the bright lights of Minehead. You know, I went, and, you know, I just, it's of an era for me, and I want to preserve that memory and that feeling. So I went to We Out Here, and it felt like the perfect combo of the Southport Weekender, that musical lineage, that family, and the Big Chill Festival. It was that kind of combination of the two, and I thought, oh, it's back. That feeling came back, that connection, the fact that, you know, we were walking in all the tents, and, you know, I had my family with me now, so we were of an age where we could, you know, enjoy the music, and they could enjoy it. It was small enough. And the kids knew a lot of the music, because we would still play music to them. So we had a great time there, and we reconnected with a lot of people that we hadn't seen, because we lived in Wales, and, you know, we connected with people from up north and down south, and it was like a family reunion, really, We Out Here in 2019. And part of that reunion was rekindling friendship with some women called Fran and Andrea, who were both playing, and, you know, I'd kind of hung out with them. I'd DJ'd with them back in my 20s, and we'd all become parents. We were all mums, and so it was just really nice to see them and reconnect with them. And, you know, we got talking about how life had changed since becoming a mum, and how music was still important to us. And, you know, I told them about Mum's the Word, and they had little pockets of women that they were DJing with up north. And I said, oh, we should, you know, we were all saying, oh, maybe we should get something together. And that's how Eavesdrop was formed.
And what is Eavesdrop Collective?
Eavesdrop Collective is a collective of 15 women from across the UK. Got people in Leeds, Liverpool, London, Bristol, Cardiff, and Manchester. And we're all women selectors. We're all of a certain generation that I'm, you know, kind of talking about, my generation, in between the Gen Xers and the, you know, the kind of rave days as such, and, you know, the millennials, the boiler room generation, I will call them. So we're kind of that little pocket there where we've still got one foot in last century, but we're very much in this one kind of thing. Yeah. And we're mums and carers, and, you know, and what have you. So we formed this collective off the back of meeting and being reunited, I suppose, at We Out Here. And then lockdown happened. So we formed this collective, and then we couldn't do anything with it. So yeah, it was just a case of continuing to, I suppose, catalogue my DJ experiences and how I kind of came into it, which is, you know, kind of picture version of this interview, I guess. And we were conversing and talking and sharing our experiences and helping each other. So we kind of came together in a period where we couldn't actually play any music together, but we could make mixes. So everybody got very DIY, and, you know, we're sharing mixes. And I think I also started doing a radio show with Tim in lockdown as well. So that very much was a catalyst for me to get back into playing regularly. So we had like a commitment to do a show a week, and it was a 2-hour show, and it kind of went out, and that was a form of therapy for us, a reconnection to music, a reconnection to, you know, how we kind of came together, I suppose. And it was a ritual. So I kind of got that ritual back again that I didn't have for a very long time because of lockdown and that commitment to doing the radio show. So that really enabled me to put myself out there with Tim and my brother as well, who then moved to Wales, and also as a DJ. So the radio show and the Instagram account and then the Eavesdrop Collective, they all kind of fulfilled certain elements of what I need to kind of re-blossom, I suppose. And that's also coinciding with the fact that, you know, once we kind of got out of lockdown, We Out Here in 2021 was one of the only kind of festivals that was going on. And by then, the Eavesdrop Collective, we'd all kind of been building up to this, it was born at We Out Here. So we were kind of invited to go and do a takeover at one of the stages at We Out Here, which is brilliant, you know. And obviously there was the Me Too movement that was going on. There was, George Floyd movement was going on, and the lack of representation and diverse lineups was not just lineups, but in general, being mindful of, you know, diversity and inclusion and opportunities. We were able to come with a different energy, and we were very much welcome with open arms, and we were really, really lucky and blessed to have that support. So collectively, I would say that we've all kind of been able to re-enter a world that possibly could have felt closed off had we had not come together, and had I have not been doing my radio show as well, I probably wouldn't be as confident to play out the way that I do now.
Yeah.
So, you know, lockdown was a bit of a period of reflection of like what's important, what fills our souls. We all had to do a little bit of that. For me, you know, and a lot of others, finding a way to reconnect over music was really, really important. And then when we came out of that, I felt like I was prepared to go back into the world kind of thing. And I also was able to reflect on the richness of my experience beforehand, the music that I've collected, and the lovely community that I'm part of. So it was really great to be able to kind of go back into that world. And also, you know, just putting myself out there with people that I know, and, you know, playing in a record shop. Well, it's, you know, it's great for us because we're in the really lovely environment where we're welcome and we're supported, and it's, you know, it's great for them because you've got people going in, they've got footfall and people buying music, because people don't really do that very often anymore, and we need to encourage that. So yeah, it was just a case of I just wanted to get out and play. And some places, you know, you do it for free, you do it as a get together, and off the back of that, you're being asked to play places, which is great. Or you go and you don't feel as afraid to go and introduce yourself and say, I'd love to put myself forward for this. Whereas I think, you know, 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't have felt as confident in doing that. So I really think that it was that resting period that we were all put into where I was able to reconnect. Obviously my kids are a bit older now.
Yeah.
My kids are getting into music. So yeah, that was kind of how I suppose re-entered it. And yeah, just having radio shows has been helpful, and being part of that collective, and obviously having a really supportive partner who totally gets it.
Awesome. So something that's shone through in this podcast is just your level of passion, not only with the doors that music's opened for you, but the lessons, the principles it's taught you. And it's been quite unique compared to the other guys. Like, there's loads of stuff we've not covered about your journey that we may have touched upon when we chatted previously. But just one last thing then to ask you is, what would be your kind of key piece of advice for anyone who's looking to start DJing?
Start with the music that you love, and you're never really going to go wrong there. There's always more music to be found. We've got amazing technology now, and I'm still finding tunes that are old tunes, but I'm not finding it through going through records because I'm not able to go out crate digging as much. I've still got all my responsibilities, but making use of all of that technology you've got there and going on some of those, treasure hunts with music is really, really valuable. Learn about your lineage, learn about the music timelines and what culture is attached to that, and really kind of get into that, because I think once you understand your place in it all, it's a lot easier for you to go back and to think forward and realize that we're all kind of part of a musical conversation and we're all part of sharing something together. So for me, it's about finding your voice, playing the stuff that fills your soul, and it moves you, or it makes you feel something deep down inside. And playing from the heart is really, really important. It's the most important thing to connect to other people. I've never been like a hands in the air kind of, tension and release drop. I love a good drop in a tune and what have you. But also for me, it's about the journey. So go and listen to some of those seminal DJs. Go and listen to Francois K. Go and listen to some old mixes and what have you from back in the day, back in the 90s. Go and listen to Larry Levan mixes. There's loads of compilations out there. There's loads of stuff. And then you'll start building up that picture of what resonates with you and what doesn't. And then always play from there. Have your key tracks that always lift you up, because whatever is lifting you up will always resonate out to other people, whether you're playing on a radio show or whether you're playing in front of thousands of people.
That's amazing.
You've got to have some of those tracks that mean something to you and that you want to put that out there. And then you'll always have, tracks that relate to it in one way or another, but just have those, this is me, I'll play this tune till the day I die kind of thing, and just have some of those things in your arsenal when you're playing, and the rest of it will make sense. When I was playing the 4 or 5 hour set, so it'd always be like one tune for you kind of thing that I know you'll all like, 3 tunes for me, and I would kind of have that give and take for my own journey as well as theirs, and it's about that kind of call and response is the job of a DJ.
Yeah.
And I think just being mindful of that, and making sure what you're calling to people is positive, because we need more of that in the world. Amazing.
Where can people find you online?
I am on Instagram. I'm annoyingly an _Sarah _Sweeney on Instagram. I've got Mixcloud, which you can find in my bio. Please do check out Eavesdrop Collective as well, because they are a phenomenal collective of women selectors.
And where do we find them? Is there an Instagram page?
Yeah, there's an Instagram page. There is a website coming up. You'll be able to see me playing at We Out Here this year. I'll be at Set. I play at a place called Paradise Garden here in Cardiff. I play in Bristol. I play in London. So, there's always a way. And I've got a radio show as well. So I play the first Thursday of every month on 1BTN. I play 8 till 10 there, which is always available for a listen back as well. So there's plenty of ways to find me, and I'm always around. So yeah, there you go.
Awesome. That's been a brilliant conversation. So thanks very much for your time.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been really good.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk.
That was nice.